In this video, we're going to go over the music editor. The music editor allows us access to the individual notes in an instrument part. So to get into it, we just find an instrument part and just double-click on the instrument event. That shows us what we would often call a piano roll view. You can see that there's a piano keyboard laid here, and then the actual individual notes proceed along the timeline out this way. Now, if you have multiple instrument tracks, you can choose which notes are shown here in a couple of different ways. The first way is to use this button right here, and this links the track selection to what we see here. That way, if I switch to the synth bass line up here in the arrange area, you'll see that what I'm seeing down here switches to include the bass synth. Same thing if I click on drums, then that becomes active here. Now I can also manage what I'm able to edit using this track list. So this works similar to the other track list in the arrange view. If I click this, you'll see that all of the available instrument tracks are available right here. I can turn them on, and I can also decide if they're enabled for editing or not. So this way, I actually have access to edit any of the tracks at the same time. If I want to focus on just one of them, like say the piano part, then I can turn these off in that view. And then out here when the piano part comes in, I can see just the piano part. So we can open and close this at any point. So I'm going to go ahead and close the track list. So now let's take a look at the rest of the controls in the music editor. Like a lot of these windows, we can resize it right here. We also have the ability to detach it. This moves it into a floating window that you can also go full size, especially if you want to put this on another screen or you just really want to focus on editing the information that's in this editor. You can also close it using this button right here. Now we also have an inspector area. We're going to come back and work with this after we get through the toolbar area. The toolbar is a repeat of a lot of things that we're pretty familiar with, and the way they work is quite similar, though a couple differences that I will point out. Now the arrow tool is what we use to move the note around, so we can move it up and down. You can hear the note as it snaps into each position or each note position because Audition Notes is turned on. If we don't want to hear that, if we turn that off, you can see I can now move these around without hearing that every time I move a note. I can move it forward and backward in time. If snap is on, it will snap to the nearest grid position. I can also trim the front edge of it, and I can trim the trailing edge of it. I can also duplicate a note with the D command, just like I would with anything else. Cut, copy, and paste, standard commands all work as well. I'll use the undo to get this note looking the way it did when I started. Let's move on to the split tool. The split tool simply allows us to split the note event into two pieces. So if we want to go from a single note to two notes, that's how we do it. If I go back to the arrow tool, as long as they're both selected, they'll both get the change there. Now, we can also use the info view. Up here, this question mark has always offered the info view. We can even float that view. I'm going to bring it down here a little bit closer. Now, we've got some important modifiers that you may not have discovered yet with the split tool related to notes. The first one is split deep. So if you just take a look at this, it will actually cut all the way through the event that's up here. This is basically the containing event. So if we wanted to make a very careful cut, say right around here at measure 12, we could use split deep. And the way that works is I hold down Option, that would be Alt if I'm on a PC. And when I do the split, not only would it split the note, but it would split the event. So it actually splits the event up here, and now I can rearrange. This is absolutely wonderful if you're trying to rearrange a part and you've got something like this where the note is just slightly preceding. And then the command key will temporarily give me the arrow key. So if I'm doing a lot of splitting and rearranging, I can do the split, hold down the arrow key, and now I can continue to rearrange these parts. So undo through that. Now let's take a look at the Paint tool. The Paint tool is actually very powerful as it relates to note editing because we can draw in notes. So if I just do this, I'll draw in a note. Now take a look in the info view and you can see that we have a modifier which is edit velocity. So if I hold down Option, that would be Alt on a PC. Now it gives me a velocity tool. That's a pencil tool with a little line by it. Now, if I drag up and down on this note, then you can see it's editing the velocity. It shows you the percent in this little box that pops up next to it, and it shows you graphically right on the note by the two-tone color code. So if we wanted to edit the velocity of an existing note, we just hold down Option, that would be Alt on a PC, and then we can modify the velocity that way. If we're drawing in a new note, then we can just drag the note forward and then up and down to modify the velocity. So this is a really powerful tool. This tool also can be used as a trim tool. If you get it near the front or the back edge, then you can trim up the notes with it. The other thing with the paint tool is that this section here is also related to the paint tool. This allows us to do note snapping as we draw in new notes. If we turn on note snapping, now as I try to draw in a note, you can see if I try to draw in a note here, it actually won't do it because it's not part of the selected scale. So scale snapping will make sure that as you draw in the notes that they're in the correct scale. Turn that off right now. Now the next tool is Note Erase. This just works by, as you touch the note with this erasing tool, it will take it out. You can just swipe it over to take out big sections of notes. So I'll undo those to bring them back. And the Mute tool works similarly to just temporarily turn notes on and off. They become hollow or ghost looking and they won't play. Now also new in version 2 is the Listen tool. The Listen tool, if you point here, it will just start playing back. If you look up here, it's also muting the other tracks, so you're only hearing the thing that you're focusing on. That saves you a lot of time because there's a lot less soloing that you have to do when you grab this tool. Next, we've got the Quantize panel. This panel is the same thing that we had up here. I'm going to go over quantizing in the next video. Now, after the Quantize panel, we have actions. If you click on this list, you'll see a wide variety of cool things that you can do with your data. But most of these open a dialog box that allows you to do something like stretching or half tempo. And typically, you'll select a group of notes and then choose one of these actions, such as stretch, and then we'll do double tempo. And quantize to 50%, quantizing the ends of the notes, restoring the timing. Those are just some of the things you can do. Also deleting double notes or short notes. Sometimes you wind up with these little blippy notes in there, that'll help clean up the data. And you even have the ability to split at the grid. So let me just show you that. This is one measure right here. I'm going to select this note. We're on an 1/8 note grid. If we do split at grid, you can see it chops it up into individual notes. These are all great tools when we're doing creative editing. Now, all of these are really duplicates of things that we've already covered that are up here, except for this quantize. This is auto quantize. I'll be covering that in the next video. We have all of our standard snap settings are repeated here. This is also the auto scroll. If you could turn this on and off, just like you could with the other editor and this view as well. Now over here, we've got some additional information. We already talked about the scale snapping. Now in version 2, this scale snap setting will also apply to anything that you move. So as I drag this note, you can see it will only snap into the scale that I have set. That's as long as this is on. If I don't, then it will snap to any semitone. So I really like this feature. If you wanted to quickly harmonize a line in one of your melodies, you can turn this on, select a few notes, and then do an option drag or an alt drag on a PC. You can see that I'm able to build a diatonic harmony very simply. Might not match the bass line that we have there quite right, but that's how that works. Now we also have mute, solo, and the ability to open the UI for the virtual instrument. This velocity setting here sets the velocity for notes as you drop them in. So if we go to this tool and just paint in a note, the initial velocity is what we have set right here. So if I set this way back low and I start to paint in the note, you can see it comes up low, and then you can increase it by going up and down. So this is sort of your initial velocity setting. Normally you'd set it up something like this. So I'll undo that. Audition notes we already covered. And then this is the start and end. This is the actual data related to the individual note. So if we click on a note here, Now we have the start and the end times, the length of the note, as well as the pitch. So we can even change the pitch right here. We can select the pitch from the list or double click on the pitch and just type it in. I'm just going to make it into an A2, and that takes it down an octave. In addition, we can edit the velocity right here. That's one way to edit the velocity, or we could mute or unmute that note. So these are all the properties related to the note. And let's just take a look at the rest of the things we've got on the screen. This opens up the controller area, and normally we want to look at velocity when we look at this view. I'm going to expand this just a little bit. So if I click on a note here, you'll see that its velocity data is now shown here in this kind of a bar graph format. This is pretty common with MIDI editors, so this should be a fairly familiar view. Now, since these notes are stacked, this is helpful because this one here I can't edit. I can only edit the one that's been highlighted. If I click this one, then that one can be edited. Now, in addition to velocity, you can also look at other common controllers when working with MIDI or instrument data. Also, we can have two of these windows stacked at the same time. We can resize them by grabbing the bottom edge right here. And ordinarily, if I'm actually working on this, I'll just use the one for velocity. The way that we have velocity shown right here makes this a little bit less necessary. But if you want to modify several velocities together, like let's just zoom out, we want to scale all these velocities, we can select all these velocities together and then scale them like that. Now, also on the screen over here on the right, we have the ability to scale the zooming. We have the zoom in, zoom out. These controls work very much like what we've seen in the arranged view. And then this allows you to zoom in more or less on the data. So with that, we've covered most of the things that you can do on the arranged view, except for the quantizing. And we'll be covering that in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.